This is the talk of Music City real estate.
Welcome back to another episode of the Talk of Music City Real Estate,
where we educate and motivate all things real estate.
My name is Monty Moore with Realty One Group Music City.
Hey, and I'm Carey Ann with CMG Financial and my mortgage team.
Every week we'll be posting a new episode of chock full of Nashville real estate value.
Yes, and you can follow along and subscribe at thetalkmusiccity.com.
Got a question for us? Ask away at questions@talkmusiccity.com. That's questions@talkmusiccity.com.
Monty, we're getting all tongue-tied here today.
I know it. I'm just.
We're just excited.
Have you all done this before?
No, never done it before.
I think it's because we have the one and only Jason
I know
back
it.
in the studio with us today.
I mean, all this extra scrutiny he brings to the whole picture, you know?
I mean, how could we done it without you here?
I don't know. We limped,
pal.
Jason. We limped without you. I'm glad you have you back, man.
Yeah.
And we have.
Man, I limped by myself, so that was a rough month and a half.
Oh my goodness.
Shout out for anybody who's gone through kidney stones.
Yeah.
We don't
avoid
want
that
anybody.
if you can.
Yeah,
I'm just a
avoid it.
local rock star here, so.
It's just a local rock star.
Hey, where's your numbers? There we go. Too funny. All right.
Awesome.
Well, we have
awesome.
a fun. Can I talk today? Not so much. What do we got going on today?
The one and only.
Yes. Midtown.
Downtown from Midtown is Mr. Chris Corriveau, the owner of Midtown Title.
Yes. Welcome, Chris.
Yay, Chris. Good to have you back. And we're going to be talking about all things tall and skinny, and that doesn't include me. I'm so glad. It's 6'5" and 190 pounds.
This is pure comedy here today. I mean, Jim, you're late to the dance, dude.
I thought this was a different channel here.
It's so much to keep up with.
No, but seriously, everybody, every real estate professional needs to know all they can about this topic about how they getting those little skinny homes on two of them on a lot.
I'm excited to talk more about because I'm running into some snags with some zoning and some different.
I bet you are.
Different things here with some clients doing some things that they thought they could do that they can't, and this and that. So this would be a great conversation. But before we get started, let's just give a shout out to our amazing sponsor, Music City Removal. They're the #1 junk removal service in Nashville from residential, commercial, and construction. They're experts in ridding you of junk. Their costs include labor and dumping fees without any hidden or added expenses. So whether you need a full clean out or just one item removed, they have you covered.
The Music City Removal team knows the importance of respect and trust while in someone else's home. They understand the inconvenience of junk left behind of previous homeowners and tenants and are determined to provide an affordable and customer-focused junk removal service that puts you first. For a free on-site estimate, go to musiccity.com. That's musiccity.removal.com.
Yes, because Music City Removal and clutter ain't cute. Hey,
we're on top of it.
We are going with it today.
Shazam is right. Holy cow. All right.
We are not quitting our day job here, Monty. We are not. We're going to stick with what we know.
But we are going to continue to bring value to the marketplace. So, you know what I'm saying?
We will. And so today we're talking tall and skinny.
Tall and skinny.
Homes.
I'll never think about it the same again. With Monty saying, hey, it's talking about myself. So every time I'm going to see one of these, I'm going to drive by and go, Monty Moore.
You don't want to do that.
So that would be an HPR, or otherwise known as...
Does anybody know what HPR stands for?
Yeah, otherwise known as ...
Horizontal Property Regime.
Okay, horizontal property regime.
What does that mean?
What a technical name.
Yeah.
It is very
technical. I like
technical.
tall and skinny's better. I've been called tall and skinny all my life.
I think
Regime. That just has a tone.
I know.
to
It sounds like a army barracks or something.
Yeah.
Depending on who you ask, they may have different words for it that we can't say on air because not everybody loves them, okay? But it's really just the way that the world works anymore. So to really understand the tall and skinnies, it's important to understand really where they came from, okay? So I always tell everybody that I've been in the business since we signed on stone tablets, so forever ago, and I've been doing it forever. And back when I started, here goes that conversation, back in my day, it was either a condo or a single-family residence.
Right.
That's what it was. There was no difference between it was one or the other.
Right.
Very clear delineated line between one and the other.
Attached or detached. Done and done.
Done and done. Well, then all of a sudden somebody figured out, hey, maybe we can put more than one house on a lot. And not call it a condo. So how do we do that? And so, we talk about the Tennessee Condominium Act, which was reformed in 2008. And this is kind of where all this started is they had to determine there was a lot of old language in the old statutes that really was super confusing. because people started building more houses on a single lot. So when you own a condo, it's important to know that all you really own when you own a condo is the airspace between the walls, right? We all know that. You own no dirt, and that's going to be the number one key on every conversation we talk about with HPRs.
Who owns the dirt underneath?
The condo is owned in common by the condo association.
The association, okay.
So every member who owns a unit in the condo association has an interest. If there's 100 units in the condo association, then you have a 100% ownership interest in the common areas, parking lots, dirt, pools, gyms, whatever it may be, that's considered common area.
Okay.
Condo, that's how it works. On a single family residence, very easy, right? You own a piece of dirt.
Right.
You own everything that's on a piece of dirt, and that's what you own. Well, when you see these tall and skinnies, what you have is you still have one piece of land. That's it. It's one lot. But there's multiple pieces, there's multiple structures on there, single family residence. They could be attached or detached. It really doesn't matter. But they actually own the dirt that lays underneath them.
Okay.
And that's what separates HPRs, tall and skinnies, from condominium, is that there's actually dirt ownership that goes on there. So that's number one that everybody has to realize. You do own a piece of dirt.
That dirt ownership is what's, if you could draw a line between the two, or is there an outline of, outline above it showing the dirt that they own, or how's that work?
Well, that's the beauty of it. They're all different.
Oh, wow.
They could be done a million different ways. Okay, some of them it's really nice and pretty. It's just a lot with a line down the middle, and one person owns one part and one person owns the other. Those are probably the simplest ones, and you see those a lot everywhere, right? Just two tall and skinnies. But what about the ones that are front to back nowadays, right? How many houses do you see that are, I call them stacked? Right. You have one in the front and one in the back, and sometimes there's even larger ones. There's developments like out in Bellevue called Woodbury Townhomes. There's 115 units out there. It's one piece of dirt with 115 units on it, and every single one of those units own the dirt that it sits on.
No kidding.
But the rest of it, like the parking areas and in the swing set areas and stuff, it's common. It's a common area. So
is that considered a PUD though, or is that considered an HPR?
It's a planned unit development. It is an HPR that is a planned unit development, because there is common ownership of other parcels, other pieces of land within the community itself.
I gotcha. And I think that's one thing as real estate agents where we can get clearly tongue-tied, and that was all themed earlier, right?
Yeah,
that was really a themed concept, because this is one that tongue-ties many of us, right? So, is it a condo? Is it a PUD? Sometimes, like you referenced, horizontal property regime, sometimes people throw in the bucket of condo, but not always, right?
Right.
So
what happened was, when the Condo Act was redone in 2008, it spelled out what creates a condo and what creates the horizontal property regime. And so the statute says, in order for it to be a horizontal property regime, it requires 5 things that they have to have.
Okay. So
the little PowerPoint, I taught a class the other day on this to some real estate agents.
Heard rave reviews, by the way.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And my little PowerPoint here has buttons that says, isn't as simple as yes or no. And it says a yes button, a no button, a maybe button, and a sorry, no answer button, right? Because that's what it is. But the statute says it's got to have 5 things to qualify for it. I ain't going to bore everybody because it's very definition heavy. But I'll just name them off. Yeah. But it says it has to have a declaration of covenants, which is the rules and regulations.
Sure.
It has to have bylaws, which are... which manages the homeowners association itself. It has to have a plat. And there's going to be 3 words that I want to key in on when we talk about this and go through the discussion. But one of the words is it has to have 2 of the words. It has to have a plat map showing private ownership and common ownership. Okay. The actual word is private element and common element. But I like to simplify the terms for people and call them private ownership and common ownership. There's a 3rd word that we'll go over too, and it's going to be a limited common element, but we'll talk about that shortly. It has to be incorporated with the Secretary of State as a nonprofit HOA, and then it also has to have an attorney's opinion letter where an attorney reviewed the documents and said it does conform with the law.
So those 5 things, they can classify it as an HPR.
As an HPR.
Okay.
So one thing to always know is dirt ownership. Okay, so if you have like a mid-rise or a high-rise, it can never, ever, ever be classified as a planned unit development, right? Because it doesn't touch any dirt.
Sure.
So no matter what, if you see anything that does not touch the dirt, there's no way it can be considered a planned unit development. And Carey Ann, I want you to weigh in on this some too, because there's a huge difference in financing.
Oh, yeah. And that's why it's really important to know, what you're about to list. Take a moment, call Midtown or talk to the title company of your choice and really figure out exactly what you're looking at. It may be attached, but it may be considered a condo. It may be, Monty Moore's condominium complex, and it still be a PUD, right? The name of it may still have condo in the name, but it's still considered a PUD. If it's truly a condo when it comes to conforming financing, you have to make sure, it's FHA approved, VA approved, or warrantable, Fannie and Freddie, right? If it's not, you can't get regular conforming financing. So if it is a PUD, planned unit development, I do own the land underneath, PUDs move me straight to go,
Yes.
No stops. So you can go and get any type of financing that you want when it comes to that. So a lot of folks are saying, hey, I can't get this condo approved. And I stop and I say, is it really a condo? Is it is it a townhome? Does it look, are they side by side or are they on top of each other? As soon as they say on top, I move, yes, it is a condo, because there's no way that I can own the land if someone's above me, right? Or someone's below me. But if it is side by side, most likely we can look into if it truly is a HPR or a planned unit development. And automatically, you and I are going to ask them for the CCNRs or the master deed?
The master deed. And that's stuff that we look up because we have access to public records. So that's a lot of times we get those calls probably 10 times a day where people are like, hey, can you tell me what this is? And the unfortunate part about our business, right, there's a lot of interchangeable words we all use a lot. The term escrow, how many times do you hear that?
Right.
Insurance, in townhome, duplex, condo, apartment. These are all words that are interchangeably used when it comes to these types of products. But they can ultimately mean a lot of different things.
Right. Usually more marketing terms, right? They're not the core of what it is.
Right.
Like I just said, they can have condo in the name of the complex and it be a PUD, and not truly a condo in the eyes of, mortgage financing.
The condo statute actually calls it an apartment.
Really?
Doesn't even call it a condominium. It calls it an apartment on there. So you have to be. There's a lot of terms that people use. Duplex is one of them. A lot of times, hey, it's a duplex. It still doesn't make it where you own the dirt. It could really be a condominium once you look at all the factors that go into it. So you just can't take somebody's word saying, hey, this is a townhome, this is a single family residence. It has to conform. And before 2008. At least now we have a set of rules we have to play by, and it tells us if it has these things, we can consider it either a condo or a single family residence. Before that, there was no rules. It was kind of like the Wild Wild West, wow. And so they could have this, they could have that, they could have some of it, and this is the truth. This is how we govern this. If it walked like a duck and quacked like a duck, it was pretty much a duck. And
if it said condo in the master deed, you and I assumed it was a condo.
The attorney's opinion letter that's required now was never required before 08, so nobody had that. And so that was missing from everything from 08 back. So what we would try to do is look at how many characteristics did it have, what did the covenants talk about land ownership, and try to make some sort of determination about how to classify this piece of property, because it made a difference for financing.
And again, if you have, it depends upon if the condo complex is 20 units or 200 units, there are specific ownership limited percentages as well, right? So if one person owns so many units, and there was a time back in 08 that some builders just took back all their properties, right? And so those condos that were once warrantable weren't at one time, right? We couldn't get conforming financing. The other thing is when you look at that master policy, am I saying it right? Master policy? Master deed?
Master deed.
Okay. If you're looking at that or the CCRs and you see condo, don't just assume it's a condo. He referenced two terms, private elements, common elements, right? So if it's private, that means I own the land underneath?
Yes. Here's a definition, and I hate reading to people because they're kind of like, you can get lost in translation, but it basically means a private element is the units shown on the plat. It's exclusive ownership and use for private elements for each unit is reserved for that unit, and it includes the entire residence, the improvements in the dirt constructed on the unit.
Got it.
So it says private elements, but just always think private ownership.
Right.
So if you're somebody looking at one of these products, you want to know what you're privately going to own.
And or if you're an agent working with a new builder or developer, they get really excited about the opportunities. You want to slow the process down a little bit and get with the title company because you want to make sure that it's legally properly zoned, depending upon not zoned, but legally, the legal description, right, is set up properly that allows for the best financing. Because if it's a brand new construction, then you're stuck with, you have to, for a true condo, you have to have so many sales before you can even try to apply to get conforming approval.
Yeah, and common elements is the second one, okay? Big word. It's what you would own in common. So you have to determine what you own in common. And every master deed or covenants that you have down has a plat map attached to it, and it should illustrate on there what's privately owned and what's commonly owned. And so it's important to know what you own in common. Do you share a driveway with the other person? Do you have an assigned parking space with that person? Are there any other, you maybe have a roof line that's even shared. Who maintains that roof line?
Sure.
So it's all in the documentation, and the average person's not going to go read all the documentation online. It's really up to us to help guide our customers and clients to understand what it is that they are purchasing.
Right.
So they know, because once you buy it, everybody knows it's too late. You already own it.
And also, when you talked about the Wild Wild West, right? So let's say you and I bought this property and you attached a PUD rider to it during the Wild Wild West, right, type of thing. It may not be a PUD, so it may have been, closed wrong at the time, right? So now what we're finding too is, back in the day, we were just like, hey, pull the last rider and you're good. That'll tell you. That doesn't tell you all the time anymore.
Yeah, and the riders would go on the deed of trust, which is basically, it just confirms the classification assigned to the property, whether it was a condominium or a single-family residence with an HOA. And if we chose wrong,
right, that's what I'm saying. Yeah,
we could be held liable for that. And so there was always, it gave me such heartburn, especially when you couldn't tell and it was really, really close to being one way or the other. And and the lender and the realtors, they all want it to be a planned unit development for financing, because once it becomes a condo, not that it can't be done, it just changes how it has to be done.
Plus, sometimes the interest rates are a little higher. That there's a lot that goes into a true condo versus, a planned unit development. So don't assume townhome means PUD. Anything attached, I would pause. Anything skinny, right, and tall, I would pause and get the documentation. Talk to a title company. Know before you go list or go have your buyer look at it. Don't assume that the seller knows what they're doing either.
Exactly.
Really take, a moment and really get the details worked out.
So one of the agents asked me, one of Monte's agents asked me in the class that I taught the other day, Monte, and she says, well, how would I get a copy of the map? I don't have access to that. And one of the things in the contract is you can actually request that kind of documentation. You can request copies of the covenants. You can request, especially if it's going to be a tall, skinny, or a horizontal property regime, I would request a copy of those covenants to make sure. And even if you don't know how to read them, get them to somebody who does know how to read them, so your customer can understand, your buyer can understand what it is they are buying. And I've got a map pulled up here, and I'll put it in front of you guys.
And I think that's the number one message that needs to be conveyed here clearly is what you just said. Right there is to make sure you get that information in front of the right people to interpret for your buyer.
Sure.
So you don't find yourself in a position where, from the customer, well, you told me this, you told me that. That's the position as realtors we don't want to find ourselves.
Yeah, and I find it interesting, Jason, and you can probably speak on this a little bit. So I'm a listing agent. The seller loves me. So I'm going to list a property, but that's all that I've done. I'm just listing a property. It looks attached. I don't do the due diligence to a point where, can I upload the covenants? Can I already have?
You should.
Think 2 steps ahead, because
if you want to be a professional agent,
right? Because a professional buyer's agent is going to demand you to provide, right? Like you're just referencing, right? I want to see those things. And as a professional listing agent, I would already do my due diligence, call a lender that you trust, or call us here at CMG Financial, my mortgage team, and we can double check. Yeah, I love that. But we can already figure out the financing. Why go into it? This is what's just like mind blowing for me, where it's like 3 weeks into the transaction and no one knows what's who's on first, what's on second, that kind of thing. Can I get this kind of financing? Can I get that kind of financing? Already do your due diligence, right?
Yes, and in front of you guys, and I know you can't see it, but I'm going to describe it to the listeners. I'm going to show 2 different maps to the people in front of me. They're going to look identical, okay? Yeah. It's 2 lots. They're long. There's 2 houses on there, and it looks like the property line runs right down between the 2 houses. So somebody owns one side, somebody owns the other. Okay? And then I'm going to show you the exact same scenario, 2 houses side by side. You notice there's no line on this, okay? And what I'm trying to describe to people is identical houses, 2 houses. They're long, tall, skinnies. In one side, people own from one left to right. That's it. And in this one here, the only thing that people would own would just be the houses, and the entire yard is considered common area here. So if somebody had a big old barking dog in the backyard, or they could set up a campfire literally behind your house.
Okay, so this is what mind boggles me too. So is this a builder issue, as in like they didn't think 2 steps ahead for, the borrower maybe purchasing? Why would
they do that?
Why would they do that
to save
versus
some money?
the other?
Is that the reason?
Probably not caring.
Right. Meaning I really think it's just point blank. I'm excited to build a house. You possibly, this is zoned to allow me to put 2 properties on this one lot, right?
Yes.
And the market's crazy and I can make a lot of profit and I build a quality home, right? Where they're forgetting about the rest of the story.
That
possibly,
yes, more than likely, yes. That's probably the scenario. Obviously, I don't know the people who did this, but I would think that because you could draw the line down there and just delineate what is for private ownership and what's not. So it's important to know, what kind of creates a plan unit development. And it's all determined by planning and zoning. Okay, it has to have a piece of property has to have the right classification in order for that determines how many houses you can build on a piece of property. And Monte and I were talking before we went on air here. He has a property that's coming up for sale, and he was, and the sellers are thinking it's one that they could split up and do an HPR on there. And so the first thing I did was look the property up, find out how big is the property, and we looked at the dimensions and figured it was about 11,000 square feet, right? The property. The zoning on that piece of property was R11. And so people go, okay, what does that mean? And without getting too deep into the zoning rules and regulations, when you think like R whatever number's attached to it, it's in 1,000. Okay, so think of it as a residence, 11,000. So each residence on an R11 piece of property would have to have 11,000 square feet assigned to it. So Monte has one house that has 11,000 square feet. That property can only hold one piece of property.
I've seen.
So if it was an R5, let's do that. You need 5,000 square feet. Well, he would have 11 on the one that he's working on there. Does that make sense? Am I losing anybody?
No, that makes perfect sense.
So I have one right now. So it's an R6.
Okay.
It was a home with a detached garage.
Okay.
So in their mind, it was zone R6, which would allow 2 properties.
Well, it has to have at
Depends on
least
how big it is.
6,000 square feet.
Okay. So
Each one's going to have 6,000, so it's got to be 12,000.
So keep going. They converted that garage into a full unit.
Yep.
And it is in a situation where I don't think the sellers thought 2 steps ahead. And there is a point ... percentage off, And so now you're in this pickle that you already converted this garage, and didn't think through that. So yes, taking a moment, pausing, actually figuring out. Now, someone gets caught, someone doesn't get caught. What ends up happening? I mean, at the end of the day, when you try to go sell it, right? Somebody who stops them at that point to say, "Hey, that shouldn't have happened."
Well, if they're going to get a loan, that's probably going to be a problem. If they're paying cash for it, probably nobody's going to check.
But the appraiser referenced to me that.
But they're getting a loan.
Right, but the appraiser, how would I know the issue? You get what I'm saying? Where would that ever come up? Except that I can do
Carey Ann,
a
supposed
one
to drive
unit.
by each property when you get that.
Well, no, I mean the appraisal says I have 1 unit with an accessory unit, like one home with an accessory unit, similar to you had which you had before when you sold, right? You had a house with an accessory. Yours was attached, but it was accessory. So in this case, the appraiser tells me that it's not his job to know R6, R11, or whatever.
Well, when they pull building permits, I'm hoping they would have pulled building permits. Metro would have, if it's in Metro, they would have kind of determined that, hey, your property doesn't qualify for a second
so guess
dwelling.
what? They never pull permits. So.
More than likely.
So that's what I'm trying to say is nothing's stopping me. Who stops me from giving them that loan? I don't know any different, right? Is there, who double checks that later in life?
Well, there's many factors. One is, like I said, it starts with planning. Is people pulling permits to do that? Some people just finish their garages out without any sort of permit, and they try to Airbnb them, or whatever they do. For our sake, I mean, from a title standpoint, it really doesn't matter to us because it doesn't affect their ownership. It might affect their use of the property, but it does not. They can still own the property. Even it may be in violation of any zoning regulations, or maybe it doesn't qualify for traditional financing anymore. But for our sake, we can get them a deed to the house, and they would own that.
Right.
So a lot of times the appraisers will come out, and once they take those pictures, it kind of puts you guys on high alert of going, hey, there's multiple dwellings that are on here, and this is not fitting. Because traditionally, correct me if I'm wrong, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, FHA, VA, it's one lot, one house, right?
Yeah, I mean,
for the most part.
Yeah, or a detached accessory. I mean, you're allowed to do that, which I'm realizing and finding out. But what we're trying to say is there's so much more that goes into the transaction. So it's important to be, one that studies your craft, right? And so if you're going to have a buyer, which we're experiencing this now, right? Because all this conversation came up, the agent said, I didn't know. I need to pause. I need to do my homework. So she started researching with, codes and permits, et cetera, because what happens when you sell that buyer that property where they expected you to be the, professional to know all the details, and nothing was stopping, you and I in regard to that. If the guidelines do allow, the guidelines allow, that doesn't mean that the zoning in the city, ever
correct.
would have allowed, type of thing.
When you see unique properties like that have like detached buildings or separate housing quarters that are on there, and I'm not talking about the apartment over the garage that's attached to the house. I'm talking about it may be a detached garage with an apartment over it. The red flag should kind of go up a little bit. Hey, first of all, did they pull permits to actually do all of that work? Because if they did not, my title insurance policy that we issue, which is the standard American land title, do not cover non-permitting issues. They still can own it, but if they have a specific use for the property that they're trying to do, Airbnb it, maybe get somebody else a family member living in there, a multi-generational housing. They should be checking with, not just assume it's been done right. They should be checking with planning and zoning to make sure that the house was approved on there. First of all, that it's passed all building inspection codes, and that the house can function in the manner that they want it to function in.
And I would think that when you go to get your rental permit or whatever with the city, that's probably where it's all going to come up.
Yes, you talk about like your Airbnb permits. Yeah, and the county, the metro itself, it's a real hot button, Airbnbs, right? I mean, people either really seems like most people hate them. I don't know. The people that love them are the people that have them. And so Metro's
I don't think your neighbors love it if it was that garage that's right near the next house, that's your primary home, possibly.
And Metro has gotten really strict on a lot of Airbnb permits, what they will and will not allow for that. And they've really condensed a lot of the approvals for that. So if you're getting them right now, they're pretty much going out and checking them and making sure that you're conforming and following what the rules and regulations are.
Yeah, so it'd be neat because the story, continues right now. We were supposed to close Thursday and all this came up, and so it's interesting where it's, where's the rest of the story going to take us? Their sellers think they can get permits. The buyer doesn't want to buy until they see permits, type of thing. However, rumor has it they never pulled permits to convert the garage, right? So it's interesting to see. And there's probably many more of these stories that are out there. So again, when you're in that situation where you see, it used to be one house, now it's two tall and skinny, or you're looking at an attached community and you want to possibly list it. It's really, take a moment, pause, call your title company, figure out exactly what you're looking at.
The key word here in this edition is pause, I think. Jason, I think we need to make sure that our agents watch this podcast, because my concern right now is that there's been so many cash transactions happen, and the pressure of closing as quickly as possible and the market being as forgiving as it is right now. One of the things I think we're going to see happen in the aftermath of this is these kind of things not being brought to light prior, and now suddenly we're going to have some agents that had wished they hadn't helped somebody buy something, unfortunately. And I mean, it is what it is at this point if they've already bought it. But the point is, I think as a whole, just like years ago when the market was super hot and people were very forgiving because the builder was late and they wanted to get out of the in-laws basement, and so they said, I don't even want to do an inspection, I just went in the house. And then we found 5 or 6 years later when they were selling the home, all kinds of construction problems because they didn't have it inspected. Well, same kind of thing here. I think the market's so forgiving, and I've never in my 37 years seen so much cash thrown at properties, and I guess sometimes maybe they're paying cash and then refinancing, or they're
we would love that. So anybody that is paying cash, we could do delayed financing.
But anyway, my point is, let's double make sure that our agents that weren't attending the class that you had. And I'm glad you're teaching on this because it brings to light a lot of importance, Chris, on these kind of things that can get people in a bad situation.
Don't judge a book by its cover, because that cover possibly is not exactly what you think it is, right? It may not be a condo. It may not be a PUD.
Well, here's
may
the
not be an
call I
HPR.
always get after closing, right? And I'll take the example I showed you guys, right? 2 houses, 2 different maps that look identical,
Sure.
but 2 different ownerships, right? And the one that I showed you where the only thing that people would own would just be the units in the whole entire yard was just owned in common.
Mm-hmm.
How many people go out there and just think they own down that line where their house is and go put a fence up?
Right.
Hey, I need to fence it in.
Yeah.
I've got dogs. I've got to fence that in.
Yeah, you
Or
can't
I
do
got
that.
kids. I need a place for them.
I need a place for them to go. Guess what? In this particular scenario, they don't have a right to do that on this
Right.
particular property. So they may bought it thinking they're going to put their dog in or whatever in there, and then they find out I can't even put a fence up in my backyard. Well, because it's not your backyard.
Right.
It's
our backyard.
our backyard that we
Right.
own in common with everybody else. And so, and by then, guess what, folks? It's just too late. And so I love the pause thing. It's so hard in our market, as you guys know, because it's so rushed.
It's hard to pause.
It is, and nobody wants to hear the word at all. But if you're buying one of these, and usually if you're working with the right people, we can get answers to you fairly quick.
Yeah. But it is important for you as a professional to, know exactly A, what you're listing, or B, what your buyers are looking at too. So this was really good. Thank you so
Chris.
much,
Yeah,
Chris,
thank you.
for being
We appreciate
here. We
you, man.
really appreciate.
Yeah, I hope that
you.
found that helpful.
Yes,
Absolutely.
and everybody
Absolutely.
for joining us today. We can't wait to have you come back. You've been listening to The Talk of Music City Real Estate.